Welcome to the Docketing Excellence webinar series.
Welcome to the Docketing Excellence webinar series, which is sponsored by Black Hills IP and the SLW Institute. The Docketing Excellence webinar series is free. Today's topic is how to use custom fields, workflows, and docketing templates in FoundationIP. Throughout this presentation, we'll be doing a step-by-step how-to series, and you'll be allowed to ask questions as we go throughout the program. The questions can be submitted using the question box on the right-hand side of your browser window. You can submit a question at any time, and we'll take the questions as we go throughout the program. The presenters today are myself, Peter Rebafoni, and Emily Bates. I'm Ann McCracken, the president of Black Hills IP. I'm a patent attorney with 20 years experience in patent prosecution. I was a partner at the Schwegman firm for 10 years, and I was also a full-time law professor and directed the patent prosecution program at Franklin Pierce Law Center for 5 years. Peter, can you tell the audience about yourself?
Thanks, Ann. I am Peter Buffoni. I am the legal process manager at the Schwegman firm here in Minneapolis. Prior to working at the Schwegman firm, which I've been at for 15 years, I worked at Dorsey & Whitney and Black, Low & Graham in Seattle. Emily?
Hello, I'm Emily Bates, and I'm the Database Automation Administrator here at Schwegman. I've been at Schwegman for 17 years and have held a variety of roles from case management to supervisor.
Well, thank you, Peter and Emily, for being part of the program today. Today's program is going to focus on the FoundationIP docketing system. FoundationIP is a web-based IP management system that is offered today by CPA Global. Just a note, Black Hills IP is not affiliated with CPA Global. The FoundationIP system is a powerful, efficient, and very hassle-free system. I, on a personal note, as a practicing attorney, used it for many, many years in my practice and thought it was a great system. It has an integrated file wrapper view, official docket deadlines, and workflows. There's a lot of things that are great about the system. It's one of the most successful IP platforms, and it's used by a large number of law firms and companies. And like I said, it has many great features for managing a prosecution practice in particular. And one of those features that we're going to focus on today that really enables that is the template system. So you can use the FoundationIP system straight out of the box without having to do any custom configurations, but it also has some great functionality to allow you to do custom configurations to meet your specific needs. And that's what Peter and Emily are going to talk about today. So Peter, I'll hand it over to you.
So as Ann mentioned, the templates coming out of the box with the FoundationIP system are great, and they track a lot of your country law dates remarkably well. But it is helpful to want to customize your templates for a variety of reasons. The first reason would be improving the internal workflow of your legal teams. You could, for instance, we will track internal processes that may not have hard docketed deadlines from a patent office, whether that's reviewing matters that are in process or tracking of documents that have been sent to a client for review and signature. Those are really great reasons to customize templates to keep track of those deadlines. And it really helps to move those items off of an individual's docket into a system type of a docketing template configuration, so that if you have someone who's out or if you have someone who is working in a team, that transparency is there. Equally important for customizing templates is client-driven deadlines and due dates. The minute you have two clients, you now have probably two requirements for client specifics. And FIP allows you to create templates that you could have a new system or a new set of templates for every client, or at least for your large clients that have a lot of internal deadlines themselves, whether that's reviewing drafts for approval, or meeting a client-driven bar date or deadline. So those are the big reasons why you'd want to take FIP to another level and create custom templates. Emily is going to now show some examples of sample workflows.
Okay, so our first example is where we're going to create a template and launch a rule. And so we say we have a client, XYZ, and they requested a draft response within 6 weeks of receiving a non-final or final office action. What we're going to do is create a template that will launch from that non-final or final office action. And it'll have a due date 6 weeks from the mailing date. In the template details, we're going to add that it should only launch when XYZ Corporation is in the role of the client. So if actions come in for a different client, this draft due activity will not launch. If you have multiple clients with differing draft due dates, you can create multiple versions of the template and create multiple rules. So this is really where you can see some of the flexibility when you can go in and customize the templates to do what you want. Then once we get our template created, we're going to add a rule to the non-final and final office action templates to launch the draft response activity. You can see that in this next screen of like the activities. You can see that we have the non-final office action here. In FIP, it'll automatically launch the response date, but since in the entities we have XYZ Corporation playing the role of client, it also launched this office action recommendation due 6 weeks from the mailing date of the non-final office action. And then if we dig in a little deeper, if we actually go into the non-final office action code here, this template, and look at the rules, you can see that there are a number of rules here. The top two are FIP-generated rules. You can see it doesn't have the little box. That means you cannot edit, and you can see you can't edit over here. We cannot edit or delete these. These are part of the FIP-generated templates. But these last three are ones that we have added to the system for specific clients. So we have different rules for different clients that will launch at different times, depending on if all the rules are met. In the next example, I'm going to talk about launching another template, but also launching an automatic email to be sent out. So say you have an invention disclosure, you want to create an invention disclosure workflow that will notify the committees and add a decision due date. So what you want to do is you're going to create a template that launches from the invention disclosure date that is entered. It's going to launch a decision due date 8 weeks out in the future. And then what it can also do is also then launch and send an email to specific people that play roles in the matter. So in this case, we're picking the committee chair and the inventor to let them know and send them an email saying a new disclosure has been added to the system. So they have their 8 weeks to figure it out. We get close to the due date or at that due date, they either have made a decision or if they have not made a decision. If they have not made a decision, we can have one process go. So if the decision hasn't been made, they'll fill in the date of the decision, but they'll also answer no to the question of a decision has been reached. Once the no and the decision date are filled in, it will then auto-launch another decision activity 8 weeks out in the future from this date of decision. So you don't have to manually go in, create another due date for this same action since it has not been, the decision has not been made yet. So it's a nice way of looping it, and so you don't have to go in and manually add the dates. If a decision had been reached, you can then fill in the date of decision, answer yes to the decision question, and then you can have the workflow set up so that it will auto-launch the next step. Like if it needs to go to legal, or if you need to get a draft application done, you can then create those further steps. So your workflow can keep growing from there on how you answer questions or fill in different dates.
And one of the great things here is that 8 week due date in the future sets an expectation across an organization for when this decision should, in all likelihood, be reached. And it's a way of not getting that date lost in the email to everybody working on that client, that here's the expectation. It's reinforced every time a new disclosure is opened.
So now I'm going to walk you through how to actually create one way to create a simple template with a rule to launch another activity. So in FoundationIP, you're going to go and it's going to say hello, and it'll have your name there. There'll be a little drop down, and what you want to do is you want to pick setup. It'll bring you to the setup screen, and we're going to go to country law and templates. So here is where, as you know, as users of FoundationIP, when you're going to add a new activity, there's a code you need to create. So if you're going to create a new template, you need to have a code in mind that you want to use. You can either enter the code or enter the name, and what you want to do first is search to make sure you don't already have this code existing or this template existing. So we want to put our code in there, and you can hit search, and what you want is no results returned. That's what you want to show up when you do that search. You do not want to have duplicates in the system. It can create some chaos there. So once you've found that your code doesn't exist, we're going to go over here to the add section, and you're going to bring up a drop-down list for you. This is what you're going to add. You can either add an activity template, which we're going to do, but they also have the option of a process task template or docket task template. The process task and docket task are really used by FoundationIP, and they are mostly used for country law. So I don't really use these, and so I'm going to use activity template. So now you're going to get into some of the details for this new template. You're going to enter the name of the template, what you want to call it, and then you're going to add your code. And again, anytime you want to add it manually, you need to have that code to add it to the activity screen.
Emily, is that code descriptive, or what is the best practice for creating those codes that you found?
Well, usually you try to make it so it kind of fits what you're doing. Maybe if you have a couple words in it, you can just do the first letter of each word. Something that makes it a little bit easier for people to find it and to make sense. Sometimes it comes down to you just kind of get stuck and you use a code that you think
ABC code.
Which kind of fits for you. But a lot of times you kind of go on what are the shortcuts that you already use for describing something, office action OA, OAD, office action draft, things like that you could use there. So you need to put those two in, and then you want to go down to the description, and usually I put in here is like, why is it created? Was it requested by a client, or why are we creating this? Just in case you need to go back and look at it and you can figure out why, or somebody else, created it, you can kind of see the reason why this was created or what it's actually for. This won't display anywhere when you use this template. This is just here for your information. This email body part here, this is not the section like I talked about in the Invention disclosure where you can send an email to the different personnel roles. This is not the section to do this in. This section is if you want to send an email once you've added this activity and you click Save and Report, it will then pop up this email. You have to manually pick who it is going to send to. I usually don't end up using this because we don't need this. In our firm, we don't use this step here. And then down here, you have the different dates, like effective date or end date. I personally don't use those, but you can use those for like tracking purposes. Like if you wanted to put when you started using this template, you could put in the start date, or if you wanted to, put in some text here for the effective base date on, but they're not required fields in order to move forward. So now you're going to define the template usage. What you can see, you have options here. You have the country, the matter type, the subtype. Where do you want this template to be able to be usable? What scenario or what fields or areas need to be filled in so you can actually use this template? So in this case, I just picked the United States. So I went over to the left-hand side, highlighted the United States, hit add, and it then bopped over here. You can have one country, multiple countries, all countries. So it's up to you on where this template needs to be used. And then you have matter type. And again, you can see I picked patent application, but you could have trademark. You can see over here, they have opposition, opinion, miscellaneous. They have all different types here. Again, pick what's going to fit your template. And then for subtypes, again, it breaks it down. Since I have a patent application, it breaks it down to the different subtypes of patent application. And in this case, I just picked all, because then it's going to fit what I need for this specific template. Down here, matter entity roles. This does not need to be filled in. It's an option. But if, like in my first example for the office action draft, we only wanted it for XYZ Corporation, this is where you're going to add that. So this way, the template would only be usable in matters where that entity is playing that specific role. So what I would do is I'd hit add. I'm going to find my organization, like that XYZ Corporation, then pick the role that will play in the entity screen in the matter. So I would have picked, in that case, XYZ Corporation. The role would be client. So now we're going into the activity details of the template that we're creating. So here you have a drop down for status, and the options are open, completed, and standing. A standing template kind of just sits there, doesn't really have a task or a due date or anything associated with it. Where if you use open or completed, they can have a task with it. In my example that I'm walking you through, we're going to have a task for this, so I would like to leave the status as open because there is a due date and it's an open activity that something needs to be done with. Then this comment section, you don't have to fill this in, but if you do, when this template is used in the matter, this comment will display. So when you look at your activity screen, this comment will display in that activity there. So depending on what you want to do, you don't have to fill this section in. And then FIP automatically picks public. Next, we're going to add an attribute. So you're going to click Add Attribute. It's going to bring up a section down here. And this attribute type, I'm going to go over one more. It has a drop down. And I had picked date, but you can see there are many options for you to pick from as to what you want this attribute to be. It could be something from the matter, it could be like the allowed date or different things, but you want from the attribute. In most cases, or you could have Boolean if you wanted to have a question. In this case, I'm going to pick date. So I picked date, and then I'm going to go back here. Since I picked date, I need to fill in the name of the attribute. And I entered date action mailed. So whatever fits in for your template, you are going to fill in there. Since I picked date, this is the value that automatically pulls in. So it brings up the calendar thing. And then the rest of this is just filled in by FIP. Okay, so this is what it will look like once you've hit the save. You're going to get to this screen. Then we're going to move to tasks. You're going to have to click on the task tab. Because now we're going to actually add a due date or add a task to this template. So we're going to go over here, and there's another drop-down list that you can pick from to what kind of type of task you want to add. So again, we have these two, the task template code and a docket template code. Again, these are ones that FoundationIP will use for country law. They're more complex. I usually don't end up using those two selections. So I'm usually going through either a process, I would call this a process task, or a docket task. The task up here, or I would call it a process task. If you know FoundationIP, anything with a process task due date, that date will show up in green. And usually we end up using those for more internal due dates. And then a docket task will display in FoundationIP with the due date in blue. And usually those are going to be more patent office due dates. Both types of tasks will show up on the reports that you run. My preference is to use the docket task. So now we're going to fill in the template details. You can see only certain ones are actually required. Yes?
Emily, before
Yes.
you go into the template details, we have a question. Do you know if there's any way to add a variable, such as a due date or something like that, in the comment field? It's a really good question.
Are they asking to have a date that's calculated in the comment field, or just to state what the due date is?
I'm interpreting it as a calculated date because the question says any way to add a variable. So I'm going to interpret that variable as a calculated due date in that comments field that would vary depending on, what the date's being calculated off of. I've never seen that, but not
in the
to
comments.
say that it doesn't.
No, not in the
Okay.
comments field, and that's what we're going to get to when we're going to add this docket task. We're going to add the date here. So you could put that it's due in the comments, you could put that it's due like 6 weeks from the mailing date of the office action or from the, date that the invention disclosure is received, but it won't calculate the date in the comments section. That's where you want
Okay,
those
so rather than
having
it calculated, you put a comment in there that would tell how to calculate it.
Correct.
And then at Schwegman, I'd say,
Okay.
Since we're talking about the comments field, that is really useful for giving people direction on what's expected and maybe who is taking care of this. Although these will get assigned to people and put on their docket, that comment field is something we try to leverage to say, paralegal, please do X, Y, and Z at this time.
Mm-hmm. Good. Okay, go on, Emily.
Yep. Okay, so we're going to do the template details now. So you're going to name your template, whatever you want to call it. Just try and keep it simple or descriptive so people can understand what it is when they see it in the activity screen. FoundationIP automatically fills in the date done there for completion date. And then this base date from, this will be a drop down I'll show on the next screen. But this is one, if you're going to have a task or a due date, you want to know what you're going to base this due date off of. So in my case, I picked the date the action was mailed, but we can see when they have the drop down here, you can see that they have a lot of different options. Most of them, they have manual entry, but the rest of these are really picking from fields in the matter details. So if you wanted it to base the date off the allowed date that's in the matter details, you could do that and say that it's like 14 days and the allowed date, something needs to happen. In my case, I'm going to I go down, you can see this one says activity, and this is the attribute I just added to this template that we're creating. So this is the attribute I created. You can see it's in the activity and it's the date action mailed. So that's what I'm going to pick for our base date from. So base the due date from the date that's the date action mailed. So that's my base date there. And then I'm going to add a tracked date. So this is really going to do your due date here. So again, add the description, add what you like here. Usually what I do is I put the template name and then put due to client or draft due, whatever kind of fits there. And then you have the type of due date that it is. It can be either due date, final date, or reminder. In this case, we're picking due date. And then it's going to calculate your due date. And in this case, I entered 14 days. But you can see you can enter years, months, or days from this date action mailed. You can pick up you can select reminders if you want reminders to be sent. And also if you want a rolling date, so say the first due date is 14 days, you want to get something done, so it'll show up on people's dockets. But say then you also have you want a 30 day. You could add another track date, again, fill in your description, then put in, 30 days. You can have a rolling date. So if you want more, until maybe you get to a final date, you can have more due dates in here than just the one. You are also then going to want to add and pick role here. You want to pick the roles that this task is assigned to. So that in this case, I picked paralegal and working attorney. And this is the role that they play in the personnel tab in this matter. Okay, now we're getting to the rules. So rules are typically constructed from dates, yes or no answers to questions that you have in the template, text that are contained in the attribute, completion of tasks, or any combination of the above. And what can the rules do? They can launch an activity in the matter you're in. They can also launch an activity in a related matter. You can set a field in the matter. Usually that'll be like in the matter details. You can fill in a field there. You can launch a SIDS or send an email. Like we did in that invention disclosure example, we also, we sent that email. So here is where you can kind of really get into some more customization by adding rules to your template, either an existing template or a new one that you are creating. Okay, so now we need to add a rule. There are two types of rules. You have an on-event rule or a launch when rule. On-event rule launches another activity once the current activity is either updated or completed. It is inclusive of the template. There's a trigger inside the template that is going to launch the next action. Launch when launches a new activity when a specific action occurs is looking for the trigger outside of that template. Usually something that's in the matter details. An example of this is when the allowed date is entered into the matter details, it will launch the issue fee due activity. So that's a launch when example. We're going to pick on event.
So Emily, what happens if, this is going back a little bit to role, what happens if no role is assigned?
Then the date will still be there, but it won't, like if you wanted to run a report, like I wanted to run my own docket report, and if there's no roles assigned, then it won't show up on my docket, so I'm not going to know it's there really. So you do want to assign roles to it. You can still run a report and show open dates with open dates, but it won't be assigned to anybody. So you could have somebody run a big report that shows all dates that are in your FoundationIP system for that particular activity. But if I'm running it and looking for it, I'm not going to see it on my docket. If there's a reminder set up, I'm not going to get the reminder.
Okay. Good. Go ahead.
Okay. So now we're in the rule details here. So we are going to name our rule. Basically tell it what it's going to do. So I'm telling it to launch train 2. So I'm going to tell it to launch this new template. And then again, a description here. Again, just launch the other training template is what I put. You can say launch the draft template, launch the, inventor details needed template. Just keep it simple what you want it to do. And then you have the event. You have a couple options here. There's a drop down. You have update, create, or delete. Again, I've never used the delete function on this, but for create, that would be like if this activity is added, also create or add this other activity. If answer yes to a question, also add this activity. For the update, what we're saying, when we update our template, we're going to launch this other activity here. So in this case, I am picking update. So once this is completed, I want it to launch this new template. Subject field. This is going to be another drop down. Okay. This is for what the template is listening for in order to launch this new activity. So you can see there's a bunch of different options here. You can have comment, status. You can say when the template was verified or when the template date was cleared. What I'm looking for is that completion date in this scenario. Once the train activity, the new activity I created is completed, I want it to launch this new train 2. So that's what it's listening for, this to be completed. So that's there. Rule type, FoundationIP auto picks the general. The general gives you more conditions and flexibility. So that's why I usually keep that one. Launch only can do like the update section. So really, if you need more complex rules, you want to keep on the general. Then we're going to actually define now our rule. So you're going to click on the define, and it's going to pop up another box for you. And so now we have more options. You can see you have a conditional action. That would be if this, then do this. Launch an activity. This is the one we're going to pick to launch and create a workflow within our matter. You can also launch, again, you can launch an activity in related matter. You can launch the SID. You can set the field. You can send email. And again, if you want to send an email like we did in that other example, that's where you also pick it here, is to send an email, like we did in the Invention disclosure. So I'm picking launch activity for this example. Then it pops up this next screen. Here is where you're going to add the template code for the activity that you want to launch. So it's very important that the template you want to launch is in the system before you get to this point. So if one already exists, you can just type it in here. If it didn't, you would need to go back, create a new template, and then add the code here. So it's best to have the code you want to launch already existing in FoundationIP. So I want it to launch Train 2, and then you can see some of the details here for that Train 2 template. And then FIP will automatically pick allow duplicates and maintain dependency. That's just saying that you can have more than one of these activities in the matter. And then it'll keep these two linked, they'll keep the two templates linked together. So I usually end up keeping those checked. So once you've added your template here, your template code here, you're going to click Set Attribute. So now this is where you're going to have a little drop down here, and it's going to pick some of the different attributes that you could pick from. You can pick from either showing the comments, like the one that says here, template example, completion date, or it'll pick the attribute that is in this Train 2 activity. I want the one that is the completion date for the activity that we are currently in. So I'm going to pick that attribute that we want to fill in the activity we're launching, and we want to pick it to fill in with the date that we're going to select right over here. Okay, so I've picked my attribute here, and now I want to set the date in this attribute with this date. And again, you can see there's a drop down here that has a bunch of options. You can pick a simple date, which is the one we're going to do, or you can pick the later of 2 dates, earlier of 2 dates, the conditional date. You have a couple different options here. So I'm going to pick a simple date because that's going to bring me to other options that I have to fill in this date. So now, since I picked a simple date, here is my drop-down list for those options. Most of these are kind of some different matter details again. I'm going to go down towards the bottom, and you're going to see that there are some subject. It says subject and it has date action mailed, or subject template example completion date. So these are like the attributes from my template that I have created. So I want to pick the subject that fits our newly created template, and I want it to be on the completion date. So again, I'm looking for that completion date right here. Then once I pick that one, I'm going to click OK. And it's going to bring you back to the rules, but now you can see we have everything filled in here, and you have a rule definition. So our rule definition is we're going to launch this Train 2 activity. That's the activity being launched. In that Train 2 activity, we're going to set the date based on the attribute in our current activity. So set this date with this one. I know it sounds a little confusing, but once you see it, it'll make sense. But this is our rule that we've defined right here by filling in all those previous boxes and those options that we chose. So once you've saved that, you're going to get to this screen here, and you can see, we're in our train template. Here's the rules. You can see you have a rule now. And again, you can see that since we created this rule, you can, edit or delete this. If you need to edit, you find that it didn't work right, you can just click the edit here and it'll bring you back to that previous screen. So now we've created our template, we've added a rule to this newly created template. Now we want to test it out to make sure that it works properly. So in this next screen here, I'm going to a training matter, and I'm going to test it out. So say that an office action was already received. So somebody had, docketing added this non-final office action received. It auto-docketed the response. In this case, in the example that we are doing, we would manually go in and add this new template, that train template. We filled in the date the action mailed. You can see this the April 14th date, and it calculated our due to client date, which is 14 days from the date the action was mailed. So our due date is April 28th. So say then we've sent it to the client, we sent it on the 24th. Now we need to follow up, and this is going to be that Train 2 activity that we told it to launch. Follow up 1 month later to follow up with the client. We have our May 24th due date here. And this example is just one, again, we had to manually add our template example here, but you could build in, like we first talked about the office action, you could build in rules to existing templates, so this would auto-launch. These would auto-launch for you.
And this is really maximizing those customized templates to be able to have this cascade of new templates launching off follow-up actions. And I think it's great because a lot of the clients are launching deadlines internally based on some other step having been taken. So once the first draft gets approval, it launches a say final draft to inventors or something like that. So it's really great to have these templates launching off one another.
Emily, we have a question that I think applies generally to what you've just talked about. The question is, are these modifications impacted when there are rule updates? For example, if there is a change in the country law update that changes the due date calculations, are these modifications affected at all? And if so, how?
So no, like say they have a country law update, it would really depend on how you had your rules set up, but for most cases, it's not going to affect what you've already done. So you may end up having to go back in and, so say a country law changed and it could affect what you're doing. You may have to go in and update some of your templates, but it shouldn't, when they update their own templates, it shouldn't touch the rules and templates that you have created and modified in your system.
Okay, good.
So just to kind of do a quick walkthrough of all of those steps that I just went through, and kind of to help you to see the continuity here. If you wanted to create a workflow and to create a new template, you want to go to the setup in FoundationIP, pick country law and templates, search for the code you want to create to verify no results returned because you don't want to have duplicates in your system. You're going to add, and as in our example, add an activity template. Fill in the following sections in the template details. Name the template, define the template usage. Enter the activity details and activity attributes. Under tasks, add a docket task. You can create the task details, track dates, and add your roles there. And then you can create rules. And as for our example, I picked an on-event rule. You can enter the rule details. And again, for this example, I picked, for the event, I picked update, subject field. Look for the one that states completion date. That's kind of my best advice for you there. Define the rule. In our case, we picked launch activity. Enter the template code for the activity you want to launch. And again, a reminder, the template you are launching needs to already exist in the system. If not, you need to create it. Set the attribute. Again, look for the one for the completion date. The same with a simple date. Choose a subject that has completion date. Then try out your new template in a test matter to make sure everything works. Because I've had many where I thought everything worked well. You go to the test matter and it didn't do what we wanted it to do. So then you go back and you modify it and edit it to get it to where you want it to be before you're going to release it to others to use. And then this is just one example of how to create a template and workflow in FoundationIP. There are many ways to do these things. This one I walked you through is pretty straightforward and simple, but you can get more complex, like we talked about in our examples for the draft response or that invention disclosure, where you have multiple workflows going off of different dates and launching off of different completions.
So Emily, here's another question. When you become proficient in FIP, not you, but when a person becomes proficient in FIP, how long would you expect it would take to create a custom template like you just did, on average?
Oh, maybe like 20 minutes to 30 minutes, for a simple one like this. Once you feel comfortable. If it gets more complex, where you have to, I want to launch an activity and launch an email, it's going to take you longer to do that and to feel comfortable with it.
Okay. And then one more question before you go into your summary. Do firms typically do this type of customization internally, or do they engage CPA or a firm such as Black Hills to do the customizations? I can speak to Black Hills. On the Black Hills side, we do not go in and customize FoundationIP systems. Peter and Emily, can you speak to who does this at the Schwegman firm?
At the Schwegman firm, we have internal people, to handle this because we feel really comfortable with the system. I think, talking with other firms and other people who use FoundationIP, a lot of them, once they've gotten into it, they will create their own templates and workflows once they feel comfortable with it. But you can always go to FoundationIP and CPA Global and ask them to help you do these steps.
Great. Okay, back to you.
So in summary, there are multiple ways to build templates and create a workflow in FoundationIP. This presentation, again, showed you one example. There are many ways to create it. And you can customize templates to create workflows, which can help you streamline your processes and track internal and client requested dates. You can create new templates or add rules to existing templates, even standard FoundationIP templates. You can add rules to those to fit your needs. Anybody have any other further questions?
Great. Thank you very much, Emily, for walking through that detailed example. I thought that was really useful. I do have another question that says, could I get a copy of the recording? And I just want to make sure the audience knows that we post all of our webinars on our website, www.blackhillsip.com. And give us a couple days, but this will be available, both the slides as well as the audio recording of Emily walking through this particular example. We'll just give just a few seconds to see if there are other questions, although I think probably most of them have been answered as we went through the program. And like I said, we'll post the slides and the audio recording on our website. If anybody has other questions, I also want to point out that there's a LinkedIn group called Docketing Excellence, and there's a great group of people that are experienced in a lot of different docketing systems out there on that LinkedIn group. And it's another place where you might be able to post a question in the future and hopefully network with somebody else who may have similar experiences that can connect and give you some experience, share some of their own personal experiences. I don't have any further questions in the queue, so I just want to mention a couple of other webinars that we have coming up. I don't have this one on the slides, but we do have another webinar about a different docketing system called AppCall. AppCall is spelled APPCOLL. We are going to talk about how to build custom fields, workflows, and templates in AppCall on May 9th at 1 p.m. Central. And then the next webinar in the general docketing portion of our webinar series is on how docketing fits with your international trademark filing strategies. That will be on June 6th at 1 p.m. Central. Both of those webinars are listed on our website. You can register by going to the Black Hills IP website. So we hope that you will join us for one of these 2 upcoming webinars or any of our other future webinars. Thank you very much, Peter and Emily, for sharing your experience today. And thank you to the audience for joining us for this webinar. Thank you, everybody. Have a great afternoon.